morning, everybody. Oh, which camera are we on here? Up there. Hi. So, on Thursday of this past week at precisely 1:35 p.m., I sat down and had this lovely lady named Diane stabbed me in the arm for my first vaccine. I know. Thank you very much. And for all of you who also went out and got your first vaccine, I applaud you. Wonderful. Good for you. We're all superheroes. I love it. Now, I don't know about you, but I did actually experience some side effects. Pretty much all of them were expected. They're all ones that are very common. Most people are getting them. My shoulder was pretty sore. I had some light flu-like symptoms. Was pretty tired. Some joint pain, stuff like that. Nothing super serious. I'm feeling pretty good this morning, but I did end up with a really strange side effect. It's extremely rare. And hold on a second. I'm just going to make sure I get the wording correctly. It's called Nalaic follicularitis. It is it's a very rare vaccine side effect. It came on very quickly, as you can tell. And man, it's really hot in here. So I'm going to just take this off. It's really hot in here wearing this thing. But with all seriousness, I had the Pfizer vaccine. Pfizer-Moderna vaccine, Pfizer, what is it called, Janelle? Is it the Pfizer-Moderna? No, the Pfizer vaccine. BioNTech, right. All right, so I had that vaccine. Like I said, I felt great. No real major issues. I just thought the hair thing would be kind of funny. And anyway, so the CDC website, it says that the COVID-19 mRNA vaccines, which is what a Pfizer vaccine is, it gives instructions for our cells to make a harmless piece of what is called the spike protein. And the spike protein is found on the surface of the virus that causes COVID-19. First, the COVID-19 mRNA vaccines are given in the upper arm muscle, up in here, the deltoid muscle. And once the instructions are inside the immune cells, the cells use them to make the protein piece. And after the protein piece is made, the cells break down the instructions and it gets rid of them. Next, the cell displays the protein piece on its surface, and our immune systems recognize that the protein doesn't belong there and begin building an immune response, making antibodies like what happens in natural infections against COVID-19. And at the end of the process, our bodies have learned how to protect against future infections of COVID-19. The benefits of mRNA vaccines, like all vaccines, is those vaccinated gain this protection without ever having the serious risk and serious consequences of getting sick with COVID-19. So you get all the benefits without any of the downfalls. Outside of a sore arm and a little bit of flu-like symptoms. Not a big deal. Like I said, Thursday, 1:35, and it is now what? It is 11:09 on Sunday morning, and I feel perfectly fine. I know that some people, unfortunately, have had worse side effects of it. Hope had really bad vertigo for about a week and a half afterwards, which I actually found entertaining because a couple times she almost fell out of bed, and I'm not the most loving and caring husband, so I laughed at her and ran out of the room before she could catch me, which is what I think most people do. So, well, probably not most. If you know my wife, you would run too, just saying. She's by the way, sitting here in the room with me, and I'm gonna get punched later. So anyways, here's a key point around vaccinations, okay? So it's gonna take us quite some time before we actually feel the impact of vaccines, of this vaccine, on humanity, right? So You think about this, I got my first dose. It's going to be several weeks before it really kicks in inside my body. And then there's a significant percentage chance of me not getting COVID-19. And then in several weeks, I think they're talking like 16 weeks now or something like that later, the instances of protection against COVID-19 go up even higher. There's some question about which percentages, but it's significant. So one of the things that I find interesting about vaccinations is my grandmother and her sister, on my mom's side, both had polio in the 40s and 50s. Now, polio was pretty crazy. In the late 1940s, this is off of the CDC website again as well. In the late 1940s, polio outbreaks in the US increased in frequency and size, disabling an average of more than 35,000 people each year. Parents were frightened to let their children go outside, especially in the summer when the virus seemed to peak. Travel and commerce between affected cities were sometimes restricted. Public health officials imposed quarantines, which were used to separate and restrict the movement of well people who may have been exposed to a contagious disease to see if they became ill. On homes in towns where polio cases were diagnosed, that's where the quarantines happen. So millions and millions of people were seriously, badly affected by polio, including some of my family members. My grandmother, my mom's mom, after polio, she came out of it not too bad. But unfortunately, after polio, she did come down with something called post-polio syndrome, which is like a mental brain disorder of some sort. And she was a little bit off for most of my life. For instance, now I know some people really like getting socks for Christmas time. Okay, it maybe is a tradition that a lot of people have. Unfortunately, my grandmother would always buy me socks and buy all of us grandchildren socks. They were the worst socks that you could find, and often they were socks that were about 7 sizes too small. But I loved her, and I never wore the socks, but I accepted them graciously because I'm that kind of grandson. She did pass away a couple years ago, and I now have to buy my own socks that I'm not going to wear, which does happen often. Anyways, so thanks to the polio vaccine, and dedicated healthcare professionals and parents who took their kids out and got them vaccinated, the polio has been eliminated in this country for more than 30 years, and this means that there is no year-round transmission of the polio virus in Canada or the United States. All of the cases of polio come from countries where people are not vaccinated. So, it's amazing to think that 30 years ago or more, the vaccine started coming out, and now we have eradicated this horrible, horrible disease. There is no way that anybody at that point in time knew how much of an impact that vaccine was going to have. Everybody hoped that it was going to work, but we had the science to support some of this, but I don't think that anybody really understood the significance of these vaccines until the last maybe 20 years. We have a lot of information now that supports the use of this, and again, polio is gone. It's pretty much doesn't exist anymore here in Canada. So, all of that being said, today we are like racing towards Pentecost. As Nathan said, this past Thursday was the Ascension Day. A lot of people call it like Ascension Sunday, but it was actually Thursday. And we are diving directly into the first chapter of Acts, Acts 1:9. After Jesus said these things, the stuff that he said before Acts 1:9, as they were watching, he was lifted up and a cloud took him out of their sight. And while he was going away, as they were staring toward heaven, suddenly 2 men in white robes stood next to them. And they said, "Galileans, why are you standing here looking towards heaven? This Jesus who was taken up from you into heaven will come in the same way that you saw him go into heaven." Now, funny thing, as I was just reading that, the part where it says they said Galileans, the first thing that popped in my head was Queen, Galileo. That's funny. It's funny to me anyways. But, so last week, Nathan spoke about the Great Commission. That is in Matthew 28:19. And it says, therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And almost immediately after that, we jump into the Ascension story, which I think is fantastic. I think it's kind of interesting. You think about this for a second. Jesus floats up into the sky, however that looked, and the disciples are standing there watching in amazement as their friend goes off. And most people have this kind of idea in their head where it's like, oh, it's really, off I go to see and sit on the right-hand side of the Father, and there's horns and stuff, and then the angels come down and they talk to the disciples, and it's this really weird thing. The two dudes in white robes show up and offer comfort. And they say, don't worry, he'll be back. Now, did you know that in the Bible, the Common English Bible, it references people in white robes 118 times in 111 verses, and they always are referenced in a form that denotes honor, respect, high position, and revered status. So we have the disciples standing there, right? And they're like, off he goes, and he's floating up, and then the guys in white robes show up, and they're like, so, this Jesus who was taken up from you into heaven will come in the same way that you saw him go into heaven. So he'll come back. And the disciples are like, yeah, okay, that's cool. Weird flex, Son of God, and all of that jazz. And the disciples, off they went on their merry way, back towards Jerusalem. So, if you know your Gospels, or even if you barely know your Gospels, you know that Jesus did some really, really weird stuff. He was very well known for doing weird, miraculous things and speaking in riddles that were obviously not understood until probably very much later on in the disciples' story, right? When you read the epistles, Paul often reaches back into the story of Jesus, and he's like, this is what this means. And this is what, when Jesus said this is what this means. Right? They know this because, well, hindsight is 20/20. So, I'm heading towards this idea that popped into my head because on Tuesday, Hope and I are celebrating our wedding anniversary. It's our seventh wedding anniversary together as after being married, but we've been together for 18 years. So, It struck me that the disciples standing there, they see the ascension, okay? And they have no idea, obviously it's a big deal. Jesus just floated up into the sky and disappeared and was hidden by clouds and was, goes and sits beside the Father, right? So obviously this is a big deal, but there's no way that the disciples knew how big of a deal it was going to be. They're sitting on the precipice of this amazing cosmic change, this change in humanity. Everything is different moving forward, but they don't know it yet. They don't know how big of a deal it is. So, like I said, I was having this moment thinking about my relationship and with Hope, and I hit this point where I was looking back and I'm like, there's a moment in my relationship with Hope and where everything changed. Where I knew everything had changed, I just didn't know how much it had changed. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit of a story here, and preemptively tell all you guys, especially young lads who are looking towards getting married, you have a lot to live up to because this is a great story. Actually, no, it's just me being a little bit autistic and off and having an issue. So Hope and I had been dating. How long do you figure it was? 4 months? 2 months? 2 months. And we had gone on several dates and stuff like that and gone for walks in the woods and bike rides out to baseboarding and all around the trails out there. But I had not kissed her at that moment. By this point, we had not kissed. So I drive her home after taking her out on a date. I don't remember where we went. That's irrelevant, to be honest with you. But I took her home and I walked her to her door because that's what a gentleman does. And I walked her up to her door and, let her go inside. And we stood there just kind of, on the precipice of the door there, where she was on one side and I was on the other side. And I think Hope was waiting for me to make the first move. And I was waiting for her to make the first move. And it didn't happen, so I was like, shake your hand, have a good night, I'll talk to you tomorrow. It's the weirdest, most uncomfortable thing. And I get in my car and I drive off. And the second I get in my car, I'm like, what are you doing? Kiss this woman. What is wrong with you? You care about this woman and you love her. Go and kiss her. You're an idiot. So I drove for another 3 or 4 minutes before I realized how much of an idiot I really was, and I pulled a U-turn in the car. I'm gonna say that it felt like the U-turns that the Blues Brothers guys did, but it was probably a 24-point turn. And I turned around and I went back, and I knocked on the door, and she opened the door, and I just stepped up and I grabbed her and I gave her a big kiss on the lips, and I didn't say anything, and I turned around and I walked away, and she's left standing there going, I can't believe that just happened. And I got home, and she'd already called me like 3 times and was like, what the hell was that? I can't believe you did that and you just walked away. That was the moment where everything had changed in my relationship. Everything had changed. And looking back now, I know that was that moment. Like I said, 18 years as of Tuesday. Janelle and Carol Ann, as we talked about earlier, Janelle and Carol Ann are celebrating 30 years of marriage this past week and 35 years together. Round of applause. That's pretty amazing. I think that's fantastic. Rob and Kathy this year are celebrating 33 years together and 32 years married. Also, round of applause. Now, I found out this morning, because Ian is here and playing piano with us, that Ian and Jane have been together for 48 years. Now, Janelle calls this kind of relationship the unicorn relationship. It's very, very rare. And I can tell you, I almost guarantee it, though I haven't asked, I almost guarantee it, that in all 3 of those relationships, they can all look back and they will have a moment where everything changed. They can probably pick at least one. There's probably dozens, if not hundreds of moments where something happened and then everything was different. And looking back, you can point to that moment where everything was different. Janelle says when Carol Ann kissed him. That was the moment where everything changed. I know for me, a big step of the moment after that kiss was several weeks later when I realized, man, I am madly in love with this woman. And I'm terrified to say it because where I come from, that word, I love you, it doesn't hold as much weight because everybody in my family has been divorced at least once, sometimes twice. I shouldn't say that, I apologize. My Uncle Rod and my Auntie Ann have been together for 50 years or something like that, which is fantastic. They have a great relationship, so everybody but them have been divorced at least once. So that whole concept of I love you, it meant a lot when I was going to say it to Hope. For me. And I remember we were taking a walk on baseboard and I think we were talking about music. And that was the moment when I said to her, Hope, I'm falling in love with you. I can't do anything about this. And she says, oh man, I'm so glad you said it before me because I was thinking the same thing. Now it's easy. But that was the moment where that was another moment where everything changed, right? So I knew that it had changed. I didn't know how big of a deal it was until I look back now, 18 years later, and I'm like, man, that was such a cosmic change in my life. That was a moment where this is a big deal. And looking back at it now, I can see that it's a big deal. And I'm sure that in my family and my friends around me, they all knew, they could see that something had changed. Right? So the disciples, after Jesus goes off and floats up into the sky, they knew that something had changed. They didn't know how big of a deal it was, but the people around them also would have seen this change, because it wasn't just like 12 disciples. There's a whole bunch of people there walking along. It's just these are the people that we're talking about, right? All of us have those moments where something changes, something's different, something gets added to your life that wasn't there before. On a bad note, maybe that is divorce. When my parents separated, and got divorced, that was a massive change, drastic change, a cosmic change in my life. Everything was different moving forward from that point. My first car, same deal, right? Everything was different. First kiss with true love. Everything had changed. That moment, everything was different. I know, like, what about this here? Maybe your first moment where you really knew who Jesus was, where you were like, oh, that's it right there. That's what Jesus meant, right? Maybe it was the first time you could really feel that change, feel maybe the Holy Spirit working in your life. The disciples, in 10 days after this moment, Pentecost happens. And again, cosmic change. Everything is different, and the disciples had no clue it was going to happen. They're right at that moment. So, did you know that the earliest version of the Ascension drawn up, it persisted in the West, like the West of the old world, until the 11th century, and it shows Christ from a side angle, climbing onto the top of a hill and reaching his hand up, and God grasping his hand and pulling him up. I have this picture I keep as my screensaver on most of my devices, and it's this point of view of Peter when he had just walked out onto the water to go and walk with Jesus, and he sinks into the water, and it's this point of view of Jesus smiling as if to, I don't know, it's just this picture of Jesus reaching down into the water and grasping Peter's hand to pull him out. And it's that moment where Jesus is like, don't worry, I got this, I've got you. And he pulls him out and puts him back in the boat, right? I love these images of those moments where everything changes. They're a great way for us to look at some of these things as for what they really are, right? I'm not going to show you the image because I kind of want you to go and look for it and see what it looks like and see what it means for you. See, like I said, this early version of this ascension it's such a big deal because we're all trying to figure out what it means. We're like, none of us were there, so we're trying to just get some grasp on how much of a big deal this was and how big of a moment that was. So, 12 years ago, in, I don't know exactly where it all happened. There's a great message online from Tim where he's talking about Redwood Park Communities. But 12 years ago, Redwood Park Communities was born out of this crazy idea. And they originally built this place with 5 units. And Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think approximately they have helped 175 women and their children. I'm going to say it again. 12 years ago, Redwood Park Communities built a home to help women transitioning out of domestic violence situations. And since then, 175 women plus their children have been helped. Again, Tim, correct me if I'm wrong. I bet you had no idea how big of a deal it was going to be the second that you walked in that door the first time. No clue how big of a deal it is. And now, Redwood Park Communities and Tim and these amazing group of people that are involved in this, now they are doing amazing things, helping support people that are struggling through homelessness and addictions. They went into second suites to help women find transitional housing to be able to get back on their feet, building apartments in people's basements to help them. Housing at Lucy's Place, building Lucy's Place and taking this derelict, drug-ridden place at the Bars Motel on Issa Street, flipping it around and turning it into this amazing place that helps people. Go and take a minute and look up Redwood Park Communities. There should be, I don't know if we got the link up or not, but it's redwoodparkcommunities.com. Go look it up. Every year since the founding of this organization, I talk with Nathan and I talk with Tim and I talk with Rhonda and some of the other people, and they're like, man, I can't believe this just happened. I can't believe that at the beginning of the year, and now we're here. They have no clue how big of a deal and how much of an impact this stuff is going to have. So I can imagine the disciples just kind of like, okay, I've seen all this weird, crazy stuff. Jesus now floating in the sky. See ya. Okay, you're going to come back at some point in time and it's going to be the same way that you left. All right, well, that's kind of cool. And there's a companion coming to be with us? Oh, okay, cool. See ya. And off they walk back to Jerusalem to go and, do their disciple things. But they're standing there at that moment as they're walking away. It's like right at the beginning when everything changes. Everything is going to change. It's fascinating. Like, I want you to think about this. Here's some context. 300 years after this moment, approximately, a group of Christian bishops come together. They're called in from all the four corners of Christendom by the Roman Emperor Constantine, all from east and west. And one of the papers that I read said that it was probably, he invited like 1,800 people. And about between 200 and 350 people show up. And they have this meeting, and they're going to discuss Christian doctrine. And they're going to try and figure out some of all of this stuff. Now, Ascension happened 300 years before this moment, okay? And 300 years of, disciples and Christians going out across the world. And now all these leaders come together 300 years later from all over this area. There's no phones, there's no email, there's not much in the way of postage by any means. Maybe the odd dude on a horseback, but they probably couldn't afford that, so they're walking, right? 300 years of teachings, and they come back together, and the stuff that they've been teaching is staggeringly similar. Okay? 300 years of teaching and preaching around the world, and they all come back and they're all teaching the same thing. There's no way that the disciples had any clue on Ascension Thursday that was going to happen 300 years later. That moment right there, that any of the moments that happened in the previous 3 years of Jesus' ministry, that any of this was going to happen. So Jesus ascended, and the church was empowered to accomplish its missions. It says in Ephesians 1:22, and it's Paul writing about Jesus' resurrection and ascension. God the Father put everything under his feet, Jesus' feet, and appointed him as head over everything for the church, which is his body, the fullness of the one who fills all things in every way. Jesus left and ascended to heaven to sit at the right-hand side of God. And that right hand has always been seen as the power of God, the might of God. And God, through Jesus, through the Holy Spirit, and he guides us and he works with us as all of this amazing stuff happened. Tim would be the first person to tell you that before Redwood started, it wasn't because he's a genius. It wasn't because he's the smartest guy on the planet and he's like, hey, this is the thing that I'm going to do to change the world. He's laughing in the corner over there going, yeah, no, it definitely wasn't that. Right? He could probably, I'll speak for him for a second, but he's probably like, Holy Spirit jumps in. Oh, geez, I can't believe this is, you want me to do what? You want me to do what now? Okay. Off he goes, jumping into the lake. Right? Trying to walk on water, figured it all out. It wasn't because of this grand plan that Tim concocted and figured out. It's because the Holy Spirit told him to go and do it, and he just was, to be honest with you, he was brave enough to go and give it a shot. Right? And he's impacted, and because of this, the people around him and Redwood Park communities that he built, 175 women plus children, and can I say hundreds more? Have been impacted because of that, not to mention the impact of those people who have been helping the organization. Oh, geez, forget about it, man. There's no way that anybody had any clue. that this was going to be life-altering for so many people. And the disciples are standing there on the precipice of world cosmic change. Humanity will be different from this moment moving forward. Jesus is the power, the mighty hand of God sitting on the right-hand side of God. And through him, that change is going to come. Jesus says in John 14:18, he leaves us with this important promise. It says, I will not leave you as orphans. I will come to you. And in 10 days, or next week, Nathan's going to be talking about Pentecost. 10 days. Jesus comes back in the form of the Holy Spirit. And again, the world changes. Humanity changes completely changes. It's this triumphal change that the world has been waiting for. That moment where the Holy Spirit shows up. The best part, I think anyways, of this moment is they see this amazing thing and nobody has any clue how big of a deal it is. And I want you to look at your life over the next 7 days until next Sunday when we talk about Pentecost. What are those moments in your life where everything changed, where you can look back and you can see that your life had changed and everything was different from that moment moving forwards? I know for me, when I think about going out and getting my vaccine on Thursday, this is for me the beginning of a change that I have no concept of how big of a deal it's going to be. Last January, nobody knew how big of a deal COVID-19 was going to be. But the world changed. Everything changed the moment that it came out. I think it was December 31st, 2019 was when the first recorded cases of this weird pneumonia were starting to come out of China. And nobody had any clue how big of a deal it was going to be. And these things happen all the time. These changes, these drastic changes in humanity happen all the time, and it's different for everybody. So take some time this week, look through these changes. Maybe it's somebody coming into your life. Maybe it's like the first time you hear a certain type of music, and man, it just hits you. Just take a bit of time and look through that. So I'm going to say a prayer, get the worship team to come back up, and we will see you next Sunday.